everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and I've got a little tutorial for you today. Here for Sew Along Sunday. We're kind of getting back into the swing of things, the normal schedule a little bit. But today I had quite a few requests when I inherited some patterns, and actually even going back to when I kind of got a vintage pattern haul. I ordered a lot off of Etsy, I think. Anyway, I had talked about how I wanted to recreate quite a few of these patterns, especially 80s and 90s patterns, and I was just going to remove the sleeve, the shoulder pad ease out of there. Had a lot of questions on how to do that, and so that's what I'm showing you how to do today. However, I just want to make a little disclaimer. Shoulder pads are back in. If you look at the runways, it's all about the 80s shoulder pad, like Dynasty, big shoulder pads. Not sure if the ready-to-wear scene is ready for that quite yet, but it is back on the runways, so you may want to not cut into these patterns. Just trace them off if you want to add back the shoulder pads later, who knows. Before we start, also, I wanted to talk about some different types of vintage patterns. So this pattern here, I'm always trying to find the dates on them. Sometimes they're on there, and sometimes you have to kind of dig. I don't see one on here. I'm sure it's somewhere. I'm not seeing it readily. But when you have upside down patterns like this, you'll notice that that is a grown-on sleeve or a dolman sleeve. In fact, the long sleeve versions of this are just, it's a dolman. It's just a drop sleeve where probably like a rectangle, maybe like a trapezoid, is sewn into the dropped sleeve. So the short sleeve version is just that grown-on sleeve. Anyway, styles like this, yes, they've used a shoulder pad there, but there's no shoulder seam to really play around with. You probably, I mean, muslin this, the same with coats, and a lot of the 80s and 90s styles are like this, which makes it really easy. Just omit the shoulder pad. I think this one calls for a 1/2 inch covered or raglan shoulder pad. It's just a lot harder to try and figure out because you're not working off of the sloper that they were working off of when they drafted this. So it does make it a little harder to take out the ease, but honestly, just by, you know, maybe you might have to, again, shorten the sleeve a little bit, but you could probably just play around with this and just not even worry about adding the shoulder pad in and just see. My recommendation for all of these, though, is just to make a muslin. It's a very easy thing. You don't have to muslin the whole thing, just the bodice, and that will tell you if you need to do more tweaking or not. Now, this style here, which I really want to make up this jacket, this was one of my mentor Joyce's patterns, which she did not take good care of patterns. They're all like shredded packages. Anyway, I do want to make this jacket. Actually, all of this. I'd love to make all of this. And this uses also a raglan shoulder pad. Yeah, 1/2 inch raglan shoulder pad, but it's because it's a drop sleeve. So I think I would just play around with omitting the shoulder pad on this and just, I don't know, messing around a little bit and seeing if it makes a difference. Because it might not. Yeah, even the t-shirt is a raglan style or a drop shoulder as well. So anyway, that's just kind of my tip for that. However, for today's tutorial, I'm using, this is McCall's 6170. It's a very 90s style dress. It does have a set-in sleeve, and this one actually calls for set-in style shoulder pads, which is what we use for jackets and coats and that kind of thing, for 1/4 inch set, 1/4 inch thick. So we're removing a 1/4 inch of ease from the shoulder and from the sleeve in order to take that ease out of this. Now, if you are messing around with coats or jackets from the 80s that have a set-in sleeve, and you don't want to take the shoulder pad completely out, because, I mean, jackets and coats, you still need a shoulder pad. I mean, you just need that structure, that support there at the shoulder. For instance, if the pattern is calling for a 1 inch shoulder pad, but you only want like a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch, you're gonna do exactly what I'm showing, except when of taking out all 1 inch. Let's say you wanted to go from a 1 inch shoulder pad to a 3/8 inch shoulder pad, you'll only be taking 5/8 of an inch of ease out of that pattern the same way that I'm showing you here. So I hope that makes sense. Because yeah, for jackets and coats, you still want to leave some shoulder pad in there just for the support of the jacket most of the time. Now this little jacket, I mean, it's just like a little unlined jacket. I wouldn't put a shoulder pad in there. But yeah, I think I would just try making this without, and then muzzling it and seeing what I needed to, you know, if I wanted to just shorten things a little and the proportion and that kind of thing. So with all of that, I'm showing you the method. So this is if you were drafting a jacket or a coat, for instance, off of a sloper or a moulage, this is the what you would do to that moulage or sloper to add shoulder pad ease. So I'm just doing it in reverse and taking it back out for this pattern. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope you can see it okay. I'm getting a new above me camera setup that should be here at some point. So hopefully these videos are gonna get a lot easier to for you guys to see. Anyway, that is all I have for today. Per always, leave me any questions you have in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's see, I've got the daily vlogs that are going up every day that there's not a formal video. But Tuesday I have a little pattern and fabric haul for you. If you do watch the daily vlogs, you've seen the fabric, but I'm talking about it in a little more detail. And the patterns, actually, you have not seen. So that's exciting. So go have a look over there. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Okay, I hope you guys have a wonderful end of your weekend, and I will see you in the daily vlogs and then see you again for formal videos on Tuesday. Bye. Okay, hopefully you can see this okay. I'm gonna be a floating head, or just a disembodied torso here. Okay, so I have this pattern. This is a vintage pattern right here that is for a, is it a dress? I think it's a dress. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that this is a set-in sleeve. A lot of the 80s, 90s, this is I think probably a 90s pattern. I don't even know if it says, but they will use drop-shouldered looks and then add the shoulder pad. That usually calls for a raglan shoulder pad. And even the jackets. And so that's a little different. And actually a lot of times with those you can get away with just putting in a smaller shoulder pad if it's a jacket, because you still want a shoulder pad for jackets and coats. Or you can get away with just omitting it and maybe just having to shorten the sleeve a little bit with those kind of styles. Now if it's a set-in like this is the trick to use for that. I would also like to point out that this is a dress where I want to completely omit a shoulder pad. However, if you are doing a jacket or a coat with a set-in sleeve that you want to keep a shoulder pad in, but maybe you don't want the 1-inch shoulder pad or even the 1/2-inch shoulder pad, maybe you'd like a 1/4-inch shoulder pad, you would do this same thing, except you would just be reducing, you know, a 1/2-inch shoulder pad by, you know, you would just be reducing it by 1/4 of an inch as opposed to all the way. Then that would still allow you to do the 1/4 inch or whatever you're wanting to do. So basically this is how you put in a shoulder pad ease for any kind of drafted pattern. So if you're working off of a moulage or a sloper and you are drafting a coat or a jacket and you're wanting to add shoulder pad, you would be doing this in the reverse. So that is kind of where this is coming from. Now, with everything you will want, sorry, my pen is over here. With everything you will want to make sure and do a muslin, especially with these vintage patterns, just to make sure everything is turning out the way that you wanted it to. Now, this is a very simple alteration, a very simple pattern alteration. Hopefully you can see this okay. I'm going to be working off the size 14 here. I don't want to cut the pattern because it is a vintage pattern. I cut it off of its big sheet, but I do want to keep it intact for future use. I have a gallery going on right now. We are all stuck at home with this quarantine, so excuse me if I seem a little distracted. Okay, so this, number one, how do you know how much ease, shoulder pad ease, is drafted? If I look at the back of this pattern, if you go to Notions, which it's here on the back, it calls for a 1/4 inch thick covered set-in style shoulder pads. That's another way you can tell if it's a set-in. If it's asking for a raglan shoulder pad, it's a little different. Usually that's a drop shoulder or a raglan sleeve. If it's asking for a set-in shoulder pad, that's where you can definitely do this trick. So this is asking for a set-in shoulder pad of 1/4 of an inch. So we know that there's 1/4 of an inch of shoulder pad ease in this pattern. The seam allowances on this pattern are 5/8 of an inch. So you can start off, although it's really not necessary, but just, oh, that's an angry dog. Sorry,
No.
The dog wanted on the couch over here and my filming equipment's in the way. She's such a diva. All right, so you can start by adding in your seam allowances, just so you can get a better idea of things. Again, I've got 5/8 of an inch. Hopefully you can see this. And I'm drawing in, just really want it here at this shoulder point. And I'm going to use 2 different color pens. Okay, so with my seam allowances put in, again, I really hope you guys can see this. You can see that here is my shoulder point right here. And this is the end of shoulder. So this is right here at the arm side. So I want to, number 1, go in 1/4 of an inch and also down 1/4 of an inch. So I want to first mark a point 1/4 of an inch, or a line, I guess. Oh, use the other pen so you can see. 1/4 of an inch down. And then I also want to go in 1/4 of an inch. So now this here, the green dot, is now my new shoulder point. So now I'm just going to take, and we're working off of the sewing line, not the cutting line. We're gonna just take the neck, per normal, to the new shoulder point, which is right here. I'm gonna draw in my seam allowance just a little bit more, just so we can get to a good spot. Hold on. This is the original armhole I'm marking. Okay, the red line is my original sewing line, or burgundy line, whatever you want to call it. All right, so now I just want to go to nothing in this straight part. So in the straight part here of the arm's eye, we're gonna go to nothing, just like that. And then it just goes right into the original curve. So now you could go back and add your seam allowances back in if you'd like. Now, this is technically the correct way to do it. However, if you don't want to mess with taking seam allowances away and putting them back up, it works the same, just with using the cut line, and then the seam allowances are already added for you. So I'll show you how to do that on the back. So that's technically the correct. So then you would need to go back and re-add the seam allowances from the green line back up. And then, you know, it'll be the same once you get to the curved part of the armhole. But that has effectively removed the 1/4 inch ease for that shoulder pad, so you could sew that per normal. So you're gonna do the same on the back, and I'll show you how to do this. I promise I did iron these. I don't know why this is, this is the same. I'll show you how to do it without removing seam allowance. But I am going to, so this is your original point right here at your cut line. So we are going to go down 1/4 of an inch. And we are going to go in 1/4 of an inch. So here's our new point there. So then we're going to go from the shoulder. So this is our new cut line. Up to the neck, per normal. Actually, if you have a French curve, it is the better tool to be using for this part. And there we go. So now I will cut at this green line and then to go down to normal all over the place. And that has effectively removed the 1/4 inch shoulder pad ease from that pattern. Now, your next question is going to be, what about the sleeve? So when you are drafting and adding shoulder pad ease into a sloper, the point here, which is the top part of the sleeve, it's usually where the dot is or the notch, that gets raised. So when you are drafting a sleeve, it looks very angular. You know, it's before you've really put in the nice smooth curve. So you raise the point here up the amount that you need, which would be 1/4 of an inch. So you could, you know, you can go down and then just lower this the 1/4 of an inch at that point, which actually puts me right at the size 12. And then I could just kind of freehand it and go from the 12 out to the 15 on both the front and the back. Or you can also draw a line. Well, you're going to want to extend your grain line, draw a line across, and this is kind of like the petite adjustment. And you're basically just taking out a 1/4 inch. These are very juicy pins. I'm making a mess. Take out a 1/4 inch tuck, which is really hard to do. So small. So then you're taking out that 1/4 inch. So then once you've done your tuck, yeah, that's really hard to fold out. There we go. Once you've taken your tuck out, then you're just going to true up your lines here and make it nice and smooth. So this is effectively just lowering the sleeve cap on your sleeve. So you would just need to take a line and just kind of true that up back to the size 14 cut line. And there, you've taken out the ease out of the sleeve head as well. So, does that make sense? I hope it does. Now, clearly, if you're working off of a garment that was made in the 80s and you're trying to take the shoulder pad ease out that way, yes, you will, you know, just sew your seam allowance to have more of a slope. You know, you're going to sew it in more, you know, at the arm's eye, at the shoulder seam, and then I would just shave off, you know, the top of the sleeve cap and kind of shape that that way. So doing it by lowering the top of the sleeve cap by your 1/4 inch or whatever it is, and then, you know, taking it out to nothing. Now you will want to do and make sure you measure your lines, your sewing lines, not your cut lines this time. You will need to measure your sewing lines for your sleeve, and then also measure your armhole front and back, the sewing lines, and depending on the type of garment you're making. But if you're making a shirt, I typically like about no more than 1 inch of ease in my sleeve. So there may be more in these. So if that's the case, you know, you can either pinch out a little this way if you want. You know, it's kind of up to you, or you can mess around with the shape. Again, muslin, or toile, whatever word you want to use to make sure that you are doing, that everything is working the way you want it to. Yeah, that's it though. That is how you remove shoulder pad ease from a vintage pattern that has shoulder pads. I hope that was helpful.